I'm Nick Harcourt, and we're going to welcome to the stage Clem and Chris and Debbie, Blondie.
Hi-ho, hi-ho.
Welcome, guys.
So, Nick, do you have an agenda, or?
I've always got an agenda. Always got an agenda. No, I think we just met before, and I've met these guys before. We did an interview for Guitar Center Sessions a couple of years ago, and we had a good time, and we just hung out for a while and said, well, there's no real agenda here. But obviously, there's plenty to talk about. A little bit of history I think we should do, but 40 years, there's a big anniversary
I'm exhausted.
coming up.
I was hoping we could talk about True Detective and sort of forget about how
Sure.
how cool the 70s were.
I hate to say, but I haven't watched it. I don't watch it. Who watches
I
TV?
saw it.
Talking about TV, while I get this in now, while I remember at the end of everything today, there is going to be a little clip from a TV show that you guys are involved with called Blondie's New York, right?
Ooh.
Do you know about that?
No, I don't know.
Okay, that's going to be at the end anyway, and I've done my bit. It's going to be on the Smithsonian channel. There's a new channel every day.
Oh, yeah.
March 21st.
Why don't we go back, though, a little bit? We're going to have a Q&A part of this as well later on, but let's just get a little catch-up. And when you look at the history of the band, when you look at the history of the music, and think about where we're at today, we're at South by Southwest, which has become, well, spring break, let's be honest. It's become spring break, but we're at an event where music is celebrated. And if you look back 40 years when you guys started, what was going on in your scene when you guys started in New York?
Not much.
25 words or less?
Well, it was a good music scene, and there were a lot of, unknown bands playing. And we have to give credit to Hilly Crystal for, promoting
CBGBs?
new music,
Yeah,
primarily.
we were operating in a void. There wasn't much going on. Yeah, Hilly Crystal, yeah. Yeah, we were kind of working in a void. It was a very isolated environment. It wasn't world-renowned as it is nowadays, and there weren't things like South by Southwest or many ways to promote yourself except go out and play at the local bar, which our local bar was CBGB.
Yeah.
But I think everybody by now, this subject has been beaten to death about the difference between now and then and the immediacy of everything. And, there's just, for example, I am amused by how quickly I can find out what something I heard on the radio is. Whereas, back then you would hear something, and if you didn't hear what the DJ said, it could take weeks or months to find out what the hell it was.
Years.
Well,
was
what
one
was
thing he looked
inspiring
for
you
years.
guys, though, at the time? What music was inspiring you? I mean, we can hear so much on demand right now, but in that period of time, you really have to search music out, right?
Everybody, talks about this Blondie sound, which is kind of elusive to me. I'm not really sure what the hell it is because we were just referencing all the stuff before us, It's kind of, maybe I'm a little too close to it, but everybody, we have all different things that we grew up with, folk. The Llewellyn Davis movie really struck a chord in me. I loved that movie so much because I was a teenager in the middle of all that
He's an old folky, Chris. He's an old
stuff. Yeah.
folky.
Yeah.
When we
Well,
first...
I mean, he plays with picks like a
I
bluegrass
still play
player,
with
so
Finger pick.
he really was influenced by that.
Well, I think when we first met, we talked about the Ronettes, Iggy and the Stooges, the Velvet Underground, the Shangri-Las, and that was kind of a common ground, and then we all went off on our own little tangents of what really inspired us individually. Chris,
Everybody had a love for garage rock, and
right,
we all knew who the Seeds were and all that stuff.
50s and 60s rock and roll, obviously.
What about the time, the zeitgeist culturally, what was going on in New York, though, and how you fit into that? I mean, obviously, there was something new that was going on at that time, and before there were hipsters, there was what was going on 40 years ago.
Beatniks.
Yeah.
These guys are
beatniks. Yeah, I identify with the Bohemian and beatnik movements more so than other, genres. But what was going on?
New York Dolls really was what was going on in New York. New York Dolls were like, I think, inspired everybody on the whole CBGB scene for sure. And they were like, aside from the Velvet Underground, they were like one of the only New York bands that was a national band that had gotten signed and that was underground at the same time, was very influential to most people, right? I mean,
I mean, there was
they
a-
had the
the
band with
Rascals.
Stilettos.
it was an ongoing music
Rascals
scene
were
that went back to the, the Loving Spoonful and
Yeah.
the Rascals
Yeah.
and, all, there was always something going on, but it didn't quite, solidify until the punk era.
But were you guys feeding off of each other, though?
Oh, yeah, I mean, people say, what were your influences, and, the Ramones and our peers were the big influences, certainly at that time, it was very incestuous. Clem and I had a discussion, we realized we never saw Saturday Night Live because we were always out on Saturday nights,
Yeah, the
Exactly.
sort of pop culture media was really not influential at all, really. It was more sort of, incestuous, for lack of a better word. The television would influence Blondie. Blondie would influence the Ramones. The Ramones would influence
It was local.
the
It was very
Dictators,
local, yeah.
And so kind of stir that pot, and we kind of like carried a torch for that whole thing. I mean, we do like Ramones covers. We do,
We
I
did
think
Johnny
early on-
Thunders, we did television, I mean, we swapped off.
Early on, we did a song, Venus de Milo, by television. I think Debbie had the handwritten lyrics from Tom, right, for Lane. And,
Yeah.
that was really the spawning ground for our sound, was everything that was going on in that sort of, anomaly that existed, which was CBGB, more
So,
or less,
so the difference between then and now is that the situation that we were in fermented for a long time, there was 5-6 years before we got any attention, so the whole thing got to cook in its own juices. Now, as soon as anybody's doing anything, they've got to tape out for the world to see, or a video or a cell phone image or something, It's just immediate. So it's a completely different paradigm. It's a whole other set of challenges.
I want to talk about that in a minute, because it is fascinating, obviously, for people who've been around a while to see how things have shifted. And myself, I was just thinking last night, that, those of us who are a little bit older have to adapt, because this is what we're dealing with today. But if you go back to then and you say 5-6 years for things to actually gel together, and then record labels coming in and starting to realize that there's a scene going on. I mean, these things happen throughout history, don't they? But at that time, as people started to get signed, what was going on with Blondie, and then how did the first album come about and the songs that were on the first album?
We were always an underdog situation also, because, the Ramones and television and Talking Heads had a very specific focus about what their style was. And we were really eclectic and all over the place, and we're always reaching into different areas, and maybe it was a little scattered, certainly, in the beginning, but I think the eclecticism had to do, makes the overall style of what the band is at this point. But, just the fact that you had to spend $100,000 to make a record probably sounds crazy by modern standards,
Well, everything coalesced when we did our first single, Ex-Offender. We went to the studio, and I don't even know if that exists nowadays. It was the classic scenario. All right, let these guys go in, record a 45, 2 songs, and then see if anybody's interested and see where it goes from there. And that's really what happened. And what we did was we went in the studio with our first producer, Richard Garde, and we actually made a record. It wasn't really a live performance. It was actually, I consider it to be a piece of art. It was a recorded record, and it showed that we were able to make a record, and that's kind of where we kind of was the jumping off point for us, making great records after that, and Richard was a big help in the early days with that. But we did a 45, and it was to be seen whether or not we were going to be able to go and make the first album based on the success or the interest after or the sound of the 45.
Anybody know who Marty Thau was? Marty Thau has just passed on, and I remember he managed the Dolls, and
He was partners
Suicide.
with Seymour,
Suicide.
wasn't he?
What?
Partners with
He had
Seymour?
been partners with Seymour and Larry Utall back with Bell Buddha Records. And anyway, I remember sitting with him in a room and listening to the first single, and then him saying, like, "Yeah, you guys realize you could print money," which didn't really quite happen. But That was his comment at the
Until
time.
40 years later.
Well, you guys did okay
Yeah.
at the
We're doing
time.
it right now.
Yeah?
Well, yeah, we survived. I think that that's, crucial. I mean, I think you have to go with the ups and the downs of it, the ins and the outs, and that's the sort of the nature of any business. But, for musicians, that can sometimes be nerve-wracking.
Well, let's talk about having success and talk about how that came about. And all of a sudden, I mean, I was in England, and if I'm correct, I think you guys broke over there first. Is that right? I'm not really sure.
Really, it's Australia first, and then later in the UK and,
Right.
and Holland, and
Right.
different places.
And I just remember as a kid, obviously, first of all, being in love with Debbie, which I still am.
I thought you were going to say me.
And but I remember, you guys just exploded in the UK, and the success really came out of there, right?
Yeah, just like Jimi Hendrix.
Can you tell us about that time?
It was exciting.
Yeah, it was a great music scene in the UK, and it was very punk, and we actually were signed to a British label, Chrysalis, and I think that I always felt that was really what made us happen first in the UK, or second anyway. But it was a great period for music. I mean, and I have to go back to what Chris was saying earlier, about fermentation and, the fact that, you had to sort of learn about something and you had to sort of be in, and it had, it's like this sort of clandestine feeling about it and a feeling of possession, it's not just everywhere, I mean, I'm of that generation, so it's like I really like the night crawl and sort of having that thing of owning something. I mean, it's just a different world now with technology.
See, I think the model for the rock star has completely changed by now. For us, for me, if my ideal to make money was to buy more gear and buy more guitars and maybe get a recording studio going. I think I had no interest in getting a Rolls Royce or a private jet. That just wasn't even part of the equation. And I think that for a lot of people now, the bling is part of the model of what a rock star is.
We'll come up to date in a minute, but before we do, I have to talk about Rapture and talk about how that changed things. I mean, that was a big shift in the mainstream of music. When you look back on it now, was that something that was specifically designed with the way you were working, or did it just naturally evolve?
Freddie took us to this rap thing and rap event in '77, and it was just super exciting. And it had been, I realized, my God, this whole universe of stuff is going on at the same time as the downtown scene. And it just seemed like a no-brainer to do a rap song or something that referenced rap, really.
Well, yeah.
But a rap song in a rap chorus or verse, I guess, in a new wave song in 1981 was pretty adventurous.
Yeah. Well, I think that one of the things that really impressed us about the rap scene was that it was, black kids talking about real stuff, talking about themselves in a different way than previously.
I'd always thought it was this whole generation of urban kids literally finding their voice and using it.
It was like this folk generation, but in rap, because everybody was talking about, problems and social situations and themselves.
But isn't that really what art has done throughout history? It's challenged
Hopefully.
challenged the moment.
Well, I think everybody in the CBGB's period was kind of rebelling against this, really, the MOR. I don't know if anybody uses the term MOR anymore, but that meant middle of the road, and there was a kind of mediocre period with a lot of faceless bands in the 70s, and the CB's punk thing came out of that as a reaction to that, partially.
We're going to take questions in a while, which is why I'm not going to delve too deeply into that time. But let's bring it up to date and talk about, obviously, Blondie first time around had a lifespan, I guess, and everything sort of comes to a point where things change. The market moves on. art moves on, sounds change. When you guys reached that point, how did things sort of drop away?
Well, you don't get an instruction book with the money or the success. You know, you have to figure out how to deal with it. And, you know, there's a lot of pitfalls involved in that, obviously. And, you know, things get a little rocky that way. And trying to come to terms with all of that can be difficult for some people. And I think we had a few problems with that along the way. And
Well, I also think the industry changed at that point, too. The partners of Chrysalis ended. You know, they broke up. And, you know, at one time, you know, remember when cassettes came out? They sort of panicked, you know, the labels all panicked because anybody could make a cassette from an existing, you know, LP, and they could steal music, and it was like, okay.
Yeah, people.
But, you know, it's like the dawn of that consciousness never stayed with them to realize that technology was going to keep going,
Right.
you know? So, you know, it sort of was, you know, preceded the whole, you know, downfall of labels.
Also, rehab wasn't part of the showbiz equation in those days.
yeah, rehab wasn't as
You know,
commonplace.
it just didn't exist, you know, so people just fucking ran if they saw that you were getting
I mean,
high.
somebody. I mean, like somebody like Johnny Thunders, if he had gotten rehabilitated, he'd probably be one of the biggest stars in the world today. You know, Johnny Thunders from New York Dolls.
Yeah.
Instead, there was really no one to help him. For that matter, I think Elvis Presley might have
Yeah.
survived if someone had taken a better turn in that. Now it's more commonplace since
Yeah,
you
it's
brought
just
it
it's
up.
part of the
you know,
deal,
Yeah.
Yeah.
which is
And,
a good thing.
So we're starting our own rehab. And getting out of the music business and going into the rehab business.
Yeah.
We
We'll
could
be
do
taking names
That's a really good
at the
idea.
end.
We could do like Dr. Phil for bands.
Yeah. We're starting it right now, I think.
It's a fucking thought.
I'll be Dr. Phil. So obviously, though, you know, it's strange to me. I sat on a stage in here a couple of years ago and talked to the guys from Devo. And the last couple of years, I guess, have seen a resurgence of interest in bands from the 80s, which is great on a whole number of reasons. First of all, kids get to hear the music. People get to hear the music. And obviously, fans such as yourselves who perhaps not had the opportunity to be out there as much, although I know you've been touring and making records, you know, for the last decade or so, but there is now an opportunity for you guys to finally sort of actually get out there and, as I think you alluded to a little bit earlier on, make some money. Because back in the day when you were in servitude or whatever,
Yeah, no, we were always...
and somebody else collected all the royalties or whatever, you guys now have the opportunity to go out and tour and actually, I guess, bring the songs to a new audience as well. So tell us about what's going on. 40th anniversary, there's an album, Glastonbury, I think you were telling me, Clam,
Yeah.
and
Right.
a whole bunch of festivals this summer.
Well, I
Tell
think
us what's going on.
touring has changed in that respect because the number of festivals worldwide has, you know, really expanded. So it gives a lot of bands a chance to play to big audiences, and instead of, you know, going around tirelessly or very tired to small clubs around the world, you know, you get to really, you know, play in an elegant situation.
And you know, we all know that it's flip-flopped, whereas back in the old days, the tour would advertise the record, and you'd make money from the record, and now it's the reverse. So everybody knows that by now.
And a band like ours, the internet has been a tremendous help in as much as back in the day, we did so much stuff on TV, shows like Top of the Pops. For example, Top of the Pops, back when, they had a mandate that the band actually had to be in the studio. You weren't allowed to present a video. So you think about how that's changed to the point where now everything can be dialed up on the internet and on YouTube, and you could see the band, and you could see what the band is about from 40 years ago and back. But as far as the availability of seeing that, it's changed completely. And you know, that's been a big help to us because obviously back when we started in the 70s, we did a lot of TV and things like that, and that's out there for people to see, and that really helps. And it's changed tremendously in that way. So it kind of connects the dots for a lot of people.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the archive or the legacy, the material that is out there for people to see. All of those TV performances you said, I'm sure not all of them are online, but a good
Most of the
good
stuff's
bunch of
out
them
there.
are.
I could consistently see stuff that I've never seen before.
Well, that's what I was going to ask
Yeah.
you. Do you guys ever come across something and you're like, oh my God, I don't
Yeah.
even remember being
All
there?
the time. I just recently saw
Yeah,
this.
it's
Oh,
stuff
and
you never thought you'd see again, and then
Whether
there
I
it is.
remember something is a whole other category.
Sure.
Yeah, I guess we did a lot of stuff, you know. I mean, we were moving pretty fast. I
Right.
remember working for, I think we worked for 7 years without stopping. Nobody had vacations. It was just keep going. And I don't think anybody does it that way nowadays. And
Yeah,
lives.
but the legacy of the band, all that works to our advantage, all the stuff we did back, which you never thought you would see again, and then you see it, so it enables people to see what the band was about back in time, and then you can realize that we're still out there, and people can like see it and for real, you know.
So,
It's kind of like an update.
Rod Swenson, who was Wendy O's boyfriend and the Plasmatics manager, shot color video of us at CBGB's in 1977, which has been sitting in his barn or wherever, and it's finally going to get released. And it's really kind of awesome. When I saw it, I was kind of amazed because it looks like it's shot now, but it's all the way back then. It has this crazy history to it, and the audio is pretty okay on it. So that's coming out.
So is that going to come out on
Yeah, with the
DVD
same
or
bunch of-
something? Or?
It's
Yeah.
part of the album package that's coming
Stuff,
out, I
yeah.
guess, right? Is that what's going on?
That's what I'm hearing, yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that package?
We have new music, we have
Old music,
old music,
and very old music.
and this video.
I thought you were going to say middle-aged music, but went back. So there's a lot of stuff there, obviously, going to be and you're self-releasing, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Tell us about that paradigm shift for you, for the industry, I guess, in general. For a legacy band such as yourself, it makes no sense to be doing anything with a record label, does it?
I don't know. That's,
Well, it's a different way of making deals, and at this stage of the game, a 360 deal for a band like us is impossible. That's all there is.
You
And
mean-
that's pretty much what deals are now.
yeah, just giving up, pieces of merch and publishing and everything else, whatever.
Before we throw it out to questions, we talked a little bit, I guess, at the beginning about the differences between when you started and where we're at today. And there's obviously a part of that impacts you as a band today and how you function and work within this paradigm. But I'm also interested to know how you see the current situation and what opportunities you see for bands, not just yourself, but for younger bands. How do you see the layout, the terrain?
Well, it's a whole cultural shift. To me, the biggest point is the explosion of hipster culture, Coming here reminded me of like World War Z for hipsters, Where like every place I look, there's fucking guys in plaid shirts and fedoras, But, so, when the fact of being an outsider, when we were starting out, if you were in a band, you were totally on the fringe. You were completely on the outside of culture. Now the whole mass of culture is all on the inside, So
How do you be an outsider today, then? I mean,
I don't
how
know.
do you do that?
I don't know, but there's got to be a way to push the envelope a little further, and people want to hear new stuff and see new.
I guess you'd have to be Mexican in this country.
If you go to a club though, and the audience looks like they should be on the stage instead of the band, or as well as the band. I mean, the lines are truly blurred when everybody wants to look like a
The first time we
musician.
went to Los Angeles, everybody in LA was wearing bell bottoms and had long hair and scarves and hippie stuff. And like within 2 months of us playing there with the suits with the little ties, everybody started showing up at the shows with the little ties. So that.
What about the first time we played here in Austin, just to reminisce for a minute, was We were on tour with the Kinks before Heart of Glass broke, and we played the Armadillo World Headquarters. And people basically thought, we were kind of from outer space at the time. But